Okay, I had to make this video. I just saw this video. I just get home. I get home. I go online, and the first video I see is some guy telling D&D players not to buy the next edition of Dungeons and Dragons. Now, this is nothing against the person who made the video. Okay, I understand what he's trying to do, and I understand the point he's trying to make. But tell me you don't know anything about D&D players without telling me you don't know anything about D&D players. And that is, tell D&D players not to buy the next edition of Dungeons and Dragons. That is the most ridiculous, hilarious thing I've ever heard. Well, one of them anyway. Because now some of you might be going, "What? Why does that? Why is that so funny? Why is that ridiculous?" Because again, a lot of you are going, "Yes, fifth edition is amazing. It's great. You all love it. Why would you want to support this next D&D?" Next version of Dungeons and Dragons, because it's all money making and stuff. Because that's what D&D players have been. How do you think Dungeons and Dragons has been around for 50 years? Because they keep revamping the damn game so that you players have to keep buying the next edition. You have to keep buying the books all over again. Excuse me. I'm sorry. I just made this. I finished watching the video and I had to make this video response to this because this is typical of modern D&D players and how you have no idea what you're talking about. You guys are so adorable. You really are. The reason they had to make second edition of D&D is because of all of the satanic panic and getting rid of the demons and stuff. So they remade second edition. They introduced second edition to try and get away from all of the demonic stuff that everybody was bitching and complaining about. Second edition, I get. The thing was, second edition was dying. People weren't playing second edition, and I can do a whole video explaining why second edition sucks and whatever. So Wizards of the Coast bought the D&D IP and introduced third edition. People liked third edition, and they bought the books. They bought the manuals. They bought the source material. They bought the modules. They bought the adventures. They bought a bunch of the settings. And then Wizards of the Coast goes, you know what? We don't really like third edition. There's too many things about it we don't really like. So we're going to scrap third edition, and we're going to introduce 3.5. Now, instead of actually continuing to play third edition and just taking stuff from 3.5 and just incorporate, because I'll use me as an example. I have not bought anything. I've not gone past first edition. I play OD&D, basic, and first edition. But here's the thing. I still play now, I understand, you know what, I'll get to that, because again, I'm probably going to be all over the place. Because again, I'm just making this up as I go along, because I just had to make a video response. And again, nothing against the person making the video. I have nothing against them. It's just a hilarious comment telling D&D players not to buy the next edition. And I wanted to explain why that is such a ridiculous statement, how it doesn't even make any sense. Because I still own OD&D, Basic, and First Edition. And when Second Edition came out, you know what I did? I didn't buy the core books. I checked out various modules that I liked, and I bought those, and I incorporated them into First Edition. There were certain settings that I liked, and I took those, and I converted those into First Edition. I didn't have to buy the Second Edition books to be able to do that, because I already had the rules of First Edition. Just take the setting and the ideas and the adventures and just convert it over. Same thing I did with Third Edition. There was a few Third Edition modules that I thought were really, really well done, and I took those and I just converted them into First Edition. Same thing with settings and stuff like that. But the people who bought Third Edition, for some reason, that didn't telling D&D players not to buy the next edition of Dungeons and Dragons is like a 404 error because they have no idea what they're supposed to do. Because here's a basic business principle of Dungeons and Dragons is that after you've bought all of these books from these editions, to be able to keep making money and keep getting you to buy stuff, just revamp the system and you have to buy it all over again. And the reason the reason D&D players do that is because if you want to play Dungeons and Dragons, you have to play the most recent version of Dungeons and Dragons because that's the one everybody's playing. Believe me, I know I get it because again, I still play basic and first edition and it is impossible and it's really hard to find people who want to play first edition when everybody is playing fifth. So if you want to play fifth edition, you have to buy the most recent edition of the game. So I get that. But that's what's been happening for 50 years. Because again, Wizards of the Coast releases third edition, goes, you know what? We changed our mind. We don't like it. We're going to do it all over again with 3.5. So what did all of the D&D players who own third edition books do? Tossed them and bought them and bought 3.5 books and bought the whole system all over again. Bought the same player's handbook, same DM's guide, same monster manuals. Again, with a little alterations to them, but again, whatever. The thing is that the D&D players tossed their third edition books and bought 3.5. After a while, Wizards of the Coast went, you know what? We want to, change the element of the game because we want to make it more in tune to, the online games like World of Warcraft and stuff like that. So they decided to revamp the system into fourth edition. Now, a lot of people, here's the thing though, you have to remember, a lot of you don't know this, but there were a lot of 3.5 edition players who were ready and willing because they were going, oh man, I can't believe I have to buy the books all over again and buy. Like there were 3.5 D&D players who were ready and willing and eager, well, not so much eager, to go, you know what? We're going to chuck 3.5 and we're going to play fourth edition and we're going to go all in again. Now, the thing is that fourth edition didn't really hit off as well as Wizards of the Coast had hoped. Now, again, there were those of you who played fourth edition and you like fourth edition, and that's great. I'm not here to challenge any of that. But the thing is that not a lot of 3.5 players converted to fourth edition. So what happened? Did you think? Did all of those D&D players stick with 3.5? Well, they would have, except Piazzo noticed a vacuum, and because of the open gaming license, released Pathfinder, or it's otherwise known as D&D 3.75. So what did all of the D&D players who owned 3.5 do? Chucked 3.5 and bought Pathfinder. They bought 3.75. They bought the next the newest iteration of the game that everybody was playing because it hit. Pathfinder was a hit. I wasn't a fan of it, but that doesn't really mean anything. It was a hit, and everybody started playing it. People started playing Pathfinder, and it was enough of a difference from 3.5 that all of the D&D players that had 3.5 went, okay, screw 3.5. We're going to start buying Pathfinder. Because that's what D&D players do. They constantly buy the next iteration of Dungeons and Dragons because that's the version that's being supported and has upcoming new material and is everybody's playing. It's not like the 3.5 players couldn't still keep playing 3.5 and just use the adventures and source books and settings and modules that, Pathfinder doesn't convert it over. No, I can't do that. That would make sense. But no, instead, they had to buy the next edition. Well, Wizards of the Coast noticed that, hey, okay, nobody's really connecting with fourth edition, and Pathfinder is taking, basically D&D 3.75 is taking all of their taking all of their business. So Wizards of the Coast goes, okay, you know what? Screw that. We're going to make fifth edition. Now, Pathfinder is still going. Pathfinder is still going. You did not have to give up Pathfinder. But what did a lot of D&D players do? They gave up Pathfinder and we're now playing 5th edition and bought the books all over again. You have D&D players who still play Pathfinder, have all the Pathfinder books, but still ended up buying all of the 5th edition books. Why? Because that's what everybody's playing. And Wizards of the Coast gets this and and knows how to manipulate the players to keep constantly buying the next edition. I mean, here's the other thing I want to talk about, because apparently I don't understand why people aren't even explaining this. It's not even a new edition of Dungeons and Dragons. It's literally, from what I've seen and what I've heard explained about this new edition, it's quite literally 5.5. That's all it is. And guess what? Wizards of the Coast already pulled this scam with 3rd edition. This isn't their first time doing this. I mean, I can't remember when 3rd edition came out, but if I remember correctly, 3rd edition only lasted like, what, 2 or 3 years before they pulled up 3.5. Now, with 5th edition, it took them, what, 10 years? But that's all it is. It's like, oh, Wizards of the Coast is just scamming people, is just doing this for money. And it's like, hey, morons, Wizards of the Coast has been doing this since they bought Dungeons and Dragons from day one. I mean, Christ, within the first 2-3 years, they scammed D&D players twice. And now you see, the problem is, okay, I'm going to try and here's the thing. For a lot of you, 5th edition is your first edition of Dungeons and Dragons you've ever played. So your introduction to Dungeons and Dragons is 5th edition. So you're not literally aware, like you are literally not aware of the fact that you're playing the 5th edition of a game. And it's like, guys, there's been technically more than 4 editions. I'd say about, 6 editions? Hold on. OD&D, Basic, 1st edition, 2nd edition, 3rd edition, 3.5, 4th, and 5th. There's been 8 versions of Dungeons and Dragons. What did you guys think? That 5th edition was going to be the last edition of Dungeons and Dragons that they were ever going to make? I mean, hell, Wizards of the Coast did 3rd, 3.5, 4th, and 5th. Wizards of the Coast alone made 4 editions of Dungeons and Dragons. 3 editions before you even played 5th. And like what? You think that the Wizards of the Coast isn't going to make another edition? Isn't going to try and pull off another 3.5 scam with 5.5? And because it's literally 5.5, it's not even a revamping of the game. It's not even the difference between 3.5 to 4 to 5th. It's quite literally 5th edition, but with a little bit of tweaking and adjustments to it, which will make the actual transitioning into 5.5 even easier. Like, it's blowing my mind that you guys for those of you who are having an issue with the idea of 5.5, did you actually think that Wizards of the Coast was never going to make another edition of Dungeons and Dragons ever again? Like what do you? I'm sorry, that's stupid. This is what I mean by you modern day gamers and fanboys and D&D players. You're adorable. You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into. This is literally how tabletop gaming works. You constantly make new editions so that the players will constantly have to buy the new edition and keep the money rolling in. And not only that, it's the idea that if you want to play Dungeons and Dragons, your only option is going to be 5.5. You might not like it, you might not think it's fair, or you might think it's ridiculous, but that's how when 3rd edition came out, and then 3.5 came out, all the players who had 3rd edition didn't like the idea that they had to convert to 3.5, but guess what? A lot of them had to. Why? Because if you went to a gaming convention, what was the edition that was being played? 3.5. If you wanted to buy products, what were the new products based off of? 3.5. Well, it's the same thing that's going to happen with 5.5. You can go, oh, I'm not interested in converting over to 5.5. Great. Well, guess what happens when a new adventure comes out? That new adventure is going to be based off of 5.5 rules. That new source book is going to be based on 5.5 rules. That new module is going to be based on 5.5 rules. That new setting is going to be based on 5.5 rules. Every new book that's coming out is going to be based on 5.5 rules. So even if you want to play, even if you're going, yeah, I'm not interested in 5th edition, well, you better realize that you're not getting any new products for the 5th edition rules. So if you want to keep playing all of the new stuff for Dungeons and Dragons, if you want to keep incorporating all of the new products for Dungeons and Dragons, guess what you're gonna have to do? Buy the 5.5 edition, because that's what every other product from here on in, well, until they make a new edition, is going to be supported. If you want to go online and play Dungeons and Dragons, which version of Dungeons and Dragons is going to be supported? 5.5. Why do you think they're trying to make it so that it's online only? Because that way you have no choice but to buy the 5.5 edition. And since so many of you play online, guess what you're going to have to do? You're going to have to convert and transition into 5.5. I mean, it's like you guys are acting like you don't. There's so many of you who are saying that you're longtime D&D players who are literally ignoring this basic element of Dungeons and Dragons and how it's existed for the last 50 years. And it's me basically. I'm not trying to soapbox. It's me trying to explain how the tabletop role-playing games work and to prepare you for what is going to happen. Now, there may be a lot of you that are going, well, I'm not going to play 5.5, so I'm going to stop playing Dungeons and Dragons. Okay, fine, but you're still not playing Dungeons and Dragons. You can try and stay with 5th edition, but it's only going to last so long, because in about a year or so, guess what? The standard's going to be 5.5. And if you want to play Dungeons and Dragons, you're going to have to convert to 5.5. They might end up tweaking it and changing it if there's enough complaints or whatever. But guess what? If you want to keep playing Dungeons and Dragons, you're going to have to play 5.5. Anyway, again, it started off with me wanting to laugh at how ridiculous it was. And it was like, tell me you don't know how, tabletop role-playing games work without telling me you don't know how to play, how tabletop role-playing games work. Or, it's tell me how, 5th edition is your first version of Dungeons and Dragons without telling me that 5th edition is your first version of Dungeons and Dragons. But all laughing and kidding and ridiculing and mocking aside, it's also a warning and letting you prepare yourself for how tabletop role-playing games work, because apparently a lot of you are really new at this and are confused and shocked at the idea that there's going to be a new edition of Dungeons and Dragons while at the same time you're playing the 5th edition of Dungeons and Dragons. I played the 5th edition of Dungeons & Dragons. Why are they making a new edition? How does that work? You see what I mean? Anyway, I've rambled on long enough, and I've soapboxed enough. Got out of my system. I'm good. I'm done. I'm out of here. See ya.